Hello everyone, this is Alexandra Rouse. I'm the HCATS project manager. Thank you for dialing in to our virtual pre-solicitation meeting. We are grateful for your participation. Just to make sure you have your computer volume at a reasonable level, you will not be able to ask questions. You can, however, type your questions in the chat that we have on the screen. We will do our best to answer as many questions today on the actual meeting time. However, we know that we're anticipating close to 375 people on today's call. We realize that we may not be able to address everyone's question. So we are taking inventory of all the questions that are coming in through chat, and we will address the questions and provide a response, and we'll post them at a future date on our Interact page. With that being said, we also had our pre-solicitation meeting in our GSA auditorium last week. We had a great turnout there as well. We had a transcriber in the room, so we will be posting a transcription of that event also on the HCATS Interact page. So you should be up to speed on everything that was discussed and shared, asked and answered at that event as well. So with that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and dive into today's presentation. Okay. And I'm going to give an overview of our guest speakers from the in-person event. They were not able to attend our virtual event. We had our first speaker kicked off the event. It was Mr. Tom Sharp, who is the Federal Acquisition Service Commissioner. He wanted to express his gratitude to industry for their valuable feedback, as it's been critical to the success of HCATS so far, and we're looking forward to working with you all more as we build out the solicitation. He also wanted to thank OPM for their close collaboration. This solution is a unique opportunity to support the largest government-wide solution for human capital and training services. With OPM, we are working together to provide government-wide cost savings, where GSA provides the contract administration and OPM will provide the policy oversight. Through this, it's a unique opportunity to support the largest government-wide solution for human capital and training services. He wanted to express that this was a great example of government working closely together and leveraging the expertise of both agencies. Our second speaker last week was Mr. Joseph Kennedy, who is the Associate Director of the Human Resource Solutions. He also wanted to thank industry for their instrumental role in getting here today with our solution. He thanked GSA for our partnership and leadership in putting together this acquisition. Mr. Kennedy is championing the agency partnership, and he recognized GSA for its unparalleled thinking in the field of acquisition and recognized OPM for its breadth and depth of expert knowledge in human capital and training. He also stated that HCATS was an example of category management and will usher in a center of excellence in human capital management overseen by OPM to offer insight into the human capital program, along with providing better data, helping government make better people management decisions while lowering costs and allowing for the repurposing of solutions and ultimately creating economies of scale. Our next speaker was Ms. Ann Rung, who is the Director of the Office of Federal Procurement Policy. She touched on category management. She wanted to share with industry that category management is a new, more strategic approach enabling the government to buy smarter and act more like a single enterprise through their acquisitions. It involves categories of spend, developing heightened levels of expertise, sharing of best practices, and providing streamlined solutions. Category management also involves managing the supply and demand within a given category, and its purpose is to increase efficiency and effectiveness while reducing cost and redundancy. Under the human resource category that HCATS is a part of, it is the first category procurement. It's also been approved by the Category Management Leadership Council this past November. This group is a compilation of the largest buying agencies within the federal government who provide their oversight and feedback on government-wide acquisitions. The CHICO Council and Chief Learning Officers also have an active involvement with validating HCATS requirements, and the HCATS acquisition and project team is a great example of how agencies are working together to deliver a government-wide procurement solution. One agency serving as the category manager, OPM, and the other as the procurement agent, GSA. Right now, I'd like to take the time to introduce Ms. Tiffany Hickson. She's our SAS Northwest Arctic Regional Commissioner, and she is also the HCATS Head of Procurement Activity. Tiffany?
Good morning, Alex. Thank you for the introduction, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone that is joining us today. Appreciate you taking time out for us. And I really do think we're going to have a good conversation today and be able to recap what we talked about in person during our industry day last week. And I thought I would take a few minutes to walk you all through really the procurement process and the acquisition team that is going to be overseeing the procurement activity for the HCATS requirement. And I serve as the head of the contracting activity, and what does that mean? That means that I am responsible for making sure that there is integrity in the procurement process, and we're following the rules that we laid out in the solicitation in terms of our evaluation process, as well as ensuring that we're following the federal acquisition regulations, as well as internal GSA procurement processes. And so in terms of color codes on this particular chart, the blue, the colors actually do mean something, and the blue is really all of the organization that supports HCATS from a GSA perspective, and the tan box is our category sponsors, and most of whom come from the Office of Personnel Management. So first I'll walk through who the contracting team is. And that is led by Jerry Watson, who is our Deputy Head of Contracting, and she is located in Region 10. Hold on, I've got someone chatting me. Can you guys hear me, Alex?
Loud and clear, Tiffany.
Oh, okay. All right, great. Thanks. So the contracting team is led by Jerry Watson, who's in Region 10. Bjorn Miller and Gail Schneider are our two contracting officers. Bjorn is overseeing the unrestricted HCATS contract, and Gail is leading our small business HCATS solicitation and contract. And they are both located in Region 2. Nassim is a contract specialist that supports the contracting officers in the work that we're doing with the procurement. And Kimberly Wallentine is also a contracting officer who's recently joined the contracting team out of Region 10. And if you'll notice, really all of GSA is being leveraged to support this requirement. We've pulled in some of the most talented contracting team members that we have in GSA. And we're pretty happy about that. And so really, how come Region 10 is leading this is we were just asked to take the lead from a procurement perspective. So my organization and Bjorn and Gail and Nassim are detailed into Region 10 as we get through the through the solicitation process. Post-award, contract administration will be transferred to Region 2, which is located in New York. So they'll be handling all of the post-award contract administration after we get through the source selection process. On the program side, Jim Gloney is the program executive overseeing all of the programmatic activities that we have for HCATS. Alexander Rouse, who just spoke, is our program manager for HCATS as we get through the solicitation and source selection process. Jimmy Hahn is her deputy out of Region 2, and Brad Demers is a procurement analyst out of Region 10 that is supporting both the program and contracting team. GSA Council, we also have a number of council members that are supporting us across GSA and getting through the source selection process. Kristen Nowadley is our lead counsel out of Region 2 in New York. John Cornell is program counsel, and he's out of our central office general counsel. And Betsy Kruger is counsel out here in Region 10. And they are working collaboratively to support us in addressing your questions and any challenges that we may run into as we get through the source selection process. From a strategic sourcing perspective, we also have a number of stakeholders that are supporting us as we get through the source selection process, and they are located both in FAS's central office. We do have an FSSI program management office, really now our strategic sourcing organization that supports us, and that's Walter Eckgress. Meredith Romley and Joni Newhart from the Office of Federal Procurement Policy are the lead staff members out of OFPP that are supporting us from a category management perspective. We also have a number of team members who are with the Office of Small Business Utilization that are supporting this requirement. Janice Bracey out of Region 2 is our lead small business specialist. Isaac Rupert-Charles is the Small Business Administration's PCR, who is responsible for really signing off on our final acquisition strategies and ensuring that they align with the requirements of the Small Business Administration and the FAR from a small business perspective. We also have a fairly robust communications team. Kara Bagtalini is our lead public affairs officer, and we also have a number of team members who are supporting her out of Region 10 and also central office. And you'll see that's Stephanie Knitzer, Joan Kornblith, and Sarah Schultz. And thank you to Sarah, who has been very active in ensuring that we get all of the information that we're doing about the procurement out into our Interact site and also into the FBO, supporting the contracting officers with that work. And from a leadership perspective, there are a number of folks that I am accountable to from a warrant perspective and who oversees my warrant activities. There are two folks that do that, and that's Jeffrey Kosis, who is a GSA Senior Procurement Executive, and he is responsible for signing off on our acquisition strategy and ensuring that the work that we're doing comports with GSA's internal procurement policies as well as federal requirements. Kevin Yule-Page is my boss, and he is the Deputy Commissioner for the Federal Acquisition Service. I'm also responsible for making sure that he keeps informed and signs off on our acquisition strategies. And Gregory Hammond, and I'll talk, Greg is actually new to the FAS leadership team. Greg is the new Regional Commissioner for Region 2 located in New York, and he will be a key stakeholder as we get ready to transition the program from my leadership to his post-award. So you'll be hearing more from Greg as we get through the source selection process. From a category sponsorship perspective, Joseph Kennedy, who spoke at Industry Day last week, is the lead executive in OPM, who is responsible for supporting us with the technical requirements. His team actually is responsible for developing the technical requirements. They'll be supporting us as we get through the source selection process. Sydney Smith-Heimbrook is the category executive for HR services and training, and she is actually the category executive for that category for the government-wide category, which is one of the first that is moving forward with doing some government-wide work from a category management perspective. George Price is the senior executive that is responsible from a program perspective, and he works for Joseph. Rich Vinicombe is Alex's counterpart and is the OPM program manager. And then we also have the Chico Council and Chief Learning Officers that have been providing us with feedback in terms of their requirements, what are those things that are most important to them as we get through the source selection process, and ensuring that from an evaluation perspective, we're really capturing the best of the best from a performance perspective based on what their requirements are. And I think that was it, from my perspective. And Bjorn and Gail, are you ready?
We're ready, Tiffany.
Okay, take it away.
Right. Well, thank you, Alex and Tiffany, for kicking off this event. And a special thanks to you, industry partners, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us to discuss and learn more about HCAHTS. Gail and I last week at the live event received a lot of positive and meaningful dialogue from your colleagues, and we expect that continued dialogue today. This event will help both you and us as we prepare and plan for the next major milestone, the release of the final RFP. What Gail and I hope to accomplish by the end of today is for you to have a better understanding of what we've done, why we've done it, and how it will help your organization and ours. Some of the material you will be familiar with and have already seen, while other material will be new. And as Alex had mentioned, we'll reserve time at the end of the presentation and hopefully answer all of your questions. For federal agencies to carry out their mission, the government workforce requires continued training and development, unique skills, tools, and knowledge. And that's the purpose of HCAHTS. We have a very large workforce, and with something as large as ours, providing as many services as we do to the taxpayers, we need a total solution. And that's why for over a year, we've worked with our colleagues across the federal government to develop a scope and a strategy that meets today's needs and tomorrow's challenges. Last week, the administrator of OFPP, Ms. Ann Rung, outlined her vision of government procurement and her strategy to accomplish that vision, category management. And HCAHTS falls under category management. There are 10 categories, and as Tiffany had mentioned, one of them is human capital. We are pleased to present to the community and to the federal government the first ever services contract solution that's endorsed and supported by the Category Management Leadership Council. What does that mean essentially? It's another tool for federal agencies, for contracting officers, for program managers, and even you to help us make better business decisions, to make more efficient purchases, and to streamline the overall acquisition process. Well, how are we going to accomplish this? This is a very large investment on our part, and we would expect the same from you. We can't just rely on just a handful of contractors. We want to establish long-term relationships so we can accomplish those goals and achieve that vision. And what Gail and I plan on proposing under both contract vehicles, the unrestricted and the total small business set-aside, or ordering periods of 10.5 years and no contract ceiling. And we believe by doing this, we're going to reduce our risk and yours. We understand it takes a lot of time and effort and resources on your part to propose your offers and to win these awards, and it takes a lot of time and effort on our part to award and administer these contracts. And we think this is going to be a win-win for both parties. In addition, another strategy of HCAHTS is to provide federal agencies with training and development, human capital, and organizational performance services. As I mentioned earlier, human capital is one of 10 categories under category management. HCAHTS is comprised of 3 key service areas: training and development, human capital, and organizational performance services. And this aligns under the category human capital. It will allow the federal government at the individual, unit, and enterprise levels to accomplish what they need at any given day. We've worked with the Category Management Leadership Council, the Chico Council, Professional Services Council, and our counterparts in the federal agency, and have heard what you've had to say throughout the entire acquisition process. We've made a lot of changes, and we've thought a lot about what you had to say, and we've come up with a strategy we believe that makes sense both today and for the next 10 and a half years. With that said, we've also realized that there's a lot of variation in the solutions you can provide to us. And that means that we have to allow for the full breadth of contract types to be included under HCAS. Not one contract type does not fit every acquisition, and we are allowing under HCAS at the task order level for you to propose pricing as you see fit. So you're permitted to propose fixed price solutions, cost reimbursable solutions, and the time and materials and labor hour variety. And lastly, we want HCAS to serve as a knowledge management repository. Under category management, and under Mr. Sharp's leadership, we've stood up the Common Acquisition Platform, a portal that the federal community will have access to see what HCAS has done, what it has to offer, leverage best practices and lessons learned so we can, again, accomplish the vision of OFPP and make better decisions going forward. The goals of HCAS. 1, to provide a flexible and customizable total solution. As I mentioned, every requirement, every project is unique. We recognize that the solution needs to fit the project risk and address the triple constraint accordingly. In addition to the various contract types that can be awarded under HCAS at the task order level, we'll also allow ancillary services and supplies to be included so you have a truly total integrated solution that you can offer. This will reduce artificial barriers in you providing that total solution. Gail's and my goal is to reduce these parameters so the government gets what it needs most efficiently and effectively, and you can provide what you are experts at. Second goal of HCAS is to maximize the use of small businesses. Small businesses have an integral part to the success of HCAS. You provide expertise in niche markets that other companies can't. And we want you to grow and be successful under HCAS. That's why we've set up a contract vehicle solely for small businesses. In addition, under the unrestricted contract vehicle, large businesses will have incorporated in their contract subcontracting plans. And it's our vision that these contractors will reach out to the small business community that have already been vetted and form partnerships so you can provide total solutions every single day for the life of your contracts. Another goal of HCAS is to provide transactional data. I'm reminded of a saying, in God we trust, all others bring data. The government needs to do better at making better business decisions, and to do so, we need to collect, capture, and analyze data. And with the Common Acquisition Platform, with your help, and with our colleagues across the federal government, we're going to leverage lessons learned, best practices, so we can reduce the time it takes to acquire future needs. We don't have to waste money unnecessarily. This also is going to be a win-win for both parties. Under HCAS, GSA is going to provide a value add in training federal users and in developing their solicitations and scope reviews. Federal agencies ordering contracting officers, much like the GWAC program, will be trained by Gail and I and be delegated authority to directly acquire the services they need under HCAS. This will leverage their resources, streamline the process, and ensure that any questions they have a working relationship and open communication with Gail and myself to make sure that their acquisitions are done properly and fairly. We want to reduce risk both on your part and ours. Finally, we have an on-ramping mechanism to refresh the contract pool. I mentioned earlier, we are going to propose a 10.5-year ordering period under both contract vehicles. And we want to ensure that every single day we have the right cadre of contractors to provide the solutions we need. There are always new initiatives coming out, the environment changes, new technologies, new ways of doing business. And we want to make sure that HCATS is a living, breathing solution going forward. Now, I've explained some of the strategies and goals of HCATS. Gail Schneider now is going to explain what you've had to say to us during the acquisition plan as we posted some of the draft documents.
Thank you, Bjorn, and we'd also like to thank industry for not only showing up to this virtual industry day, our industry day that was in person last week, but all the questions and feedback that we've gotten over this whole HCATS drafting of the RFP process. With the RFI, we had a survey, and we also received several hundred questions and comments. And with the draft RFP, we received over 600 questions in addition to comments and other feedback that we received. What we have done with this feedback is we've been using it to help us draft, not us do the final RFP. On Tuesday, we posted all of the Q&A that we received from the last Tuesday, on 5/19, that we received. We posted all the Q&A that we received from you on the draft RFP, and we also on Tuesday posted a further version of the draft of section C, L, and M. What we're doing with all of the feedback and questions that we've gotten is we've organized it, and we're taking it into account when we look at our requirements on HCATS. If you've been following us since the RFI process, you've been able to see how we took all of your feedback and made changes from the RFI to the draft RFP, which is what we're doing now. We've taken your questions, your comments, and are still taking your questions and your comments that we're receiving with this virtual industry day and what we received last week to help make it a robust RFP that we'll be releasing. On the next slide, I'm going to be highlighting some of the major changes that have been made so far since the draft RFP's release, and some of them are highlighted in the draft versions of C, L, and M that we posted on Tuesday, May 19th, alongside two other final attachments that we'll cover later. So the first major change that we made was with the NAICS codes. With all of the changes, Bjorn and I had the focus of, we want to make sure that we have maximum competition and that we're awarding to quality HCATS contractors that will serve our customers with their total solution needs. And we redesigned the requirements on these principles. With the NAICS codes, we realized that by awarding points to them, we were not aligning with the messaging that HCATS scope is defined solely by the key service areas. So what we did with that was we removed all the scoring elements attached to NAICS codes, and it's now just the minimum requirements for the relevant experience projects as it was with the draft RFP. One of the other changes that was something we heard a lot of from industry was about using your experience as a first-tier subcontractor to the government. With the draft RFP, we did not include this, but we did listen and we realized that not only should we allow it, but there's a lot of value add for somebody who has performed work for the federal government as a first-tier subcontractor. What we've done is we've created two-tiered scoring elements for federal experience. One being if the most points are given if you're a federal, if you were the prime contractor to the federal government, and then the next element, which is scored lower, is as a first-tier subcontractor, with all other relevant experience projects that were not done for the federal government receiving no points in this section, but points for all other scoring elements. Another major change was that with the draft RFP, we had points associated with accreditation for both the company as a whole and for the contractor key personnel. We got a lot of feedback from industry on this, and we realized that not only are there a lot of different accreditations for individuals, but that tying these accreditations to the contractor key personnel does not fit with the role of the contractor key personnel. And while all the accreditations are within scope of HCATS, they're not within scope of the individuals who will be the contractor key personnel. So we've removed them, and that also aligns with that we don't want to encourage people choosing individuals just based on their accreditation. The next change was about allowing collection of task orders for one relevant experience project. On the draft RFP, all projects had to be tied to a single contract task order or purchase order. Based on what we've heard from industry and on how task orders are sometimes released by the contracting officer, and that's not any choice of the offerer of how it's released, that we would allow one collection of task orders. So what you would do is you could have up to six task orders under a single master contract or BPA that are tied together based on our definition of a collection of task orders, and you'd be able to use that for one relevant experience project. For hand in hand with this is based on our definition, you would have your assessing official or contracting officer fill out our new attachment, which is attachment J9, confirmation of collection of task orders. And the assessing official or contracting officer would affirm that the task orders that you are submitting in lieu of one relevant experience project are in fact a collection of task orders that meet our definition. And we think that this provides more options to industry for the relevant experience projects. And the collection of task orders will be scored exactly like one relevant experience project. Another thing that we did was we started from scratch with the point allocation. We weighted what we think is most important about what was being scored and rescored every element based on importance. And what you'll see in section M are the new points, and we were weighting more on past performance and the scope of your projects. And the last major change that we made is that on the draft RFP, we were restricting that all contractors, HCATS contractors, would be able to take cost reimbursable work. So therefore, since all contractors had to take cost reimbursable work, either they would have to come in with their accounting system audited by the DCAA, or we would have their accounting system audited by the DCAA. But we've decided that we're going to provide more options to our HCATS contractors and offerers. The first option is that you do not have to take cost reimbursable work. Therefore, your accounting system will not be audited. It doesn't matter if it was audited in the past. You will just opt out of taking cost reimbursable work. If you would like to be eligible for cost reimbursable work, you will either come in with your accounting system either audited by the DCAA, a cognizant federal agency, or a CPA, and it's on your current accounting system, and it has to have been within the last 3 years. And if the contracting officer, Bjorn and myself, find that the accounting system is adequate from that audit, then you'll be eligible for cost reimbursable work. And the last option is you can opt into to be eligible for cost reimbursable work, but we will do the audit for you through DCAA. And if your accounting system is both determined adequate through the auditing process and through the contracting officer, then you'll be eligible for cost reimbursable work. However, if your accounting system is not determined adequate, that no longer would mean that you are no eligible for an HCATS contract. You are just not eligible to take cost reimbursable work. Now, Bjorn, with the next slide, is going to show how all of these changes factor into the scope and the structure of HCATS.
Thank you, Gail. Hopefully what you were able to just take away is that we listened to you. Throughout the entire process, we've answered hundreds of questions, fielded dozens of phone calls, and we want to get it right. And this is a partnership. And some things we didn't, and we made the appropriate changes based on your feedback. So hopefully that resonates with you. One thing that we were proud of and pleased to hear from you that we didn't have to change was the basis of award. How are we actually going to award the contracts that we plan on awarding? Well, we've called it the highest technically rated with fair and reasonable prices. And we can't take credit for creating it ourselves. This is actually modeled after the Oasis acquisition. So it's tried and proven to be very successful for both parties. What is it? Well, it's neither lowest price technically acceptable, so we're not focusing our attention on prices, on the labor rates, and driving down those prices, nor is it your traditional best value trade-off where we're analyzing and trading off price with non-price factors. What we intend on doing is awarding contracts to the top 40 scored offers that can demonstrate that they have done the work we're envisioning being performed under HCATS. And the more successful you've been at that work, the higher the scores. So let me elaborate a little bit more. The HCAT program consists of two contract vehicles, the unrestricted, total small business set-aside. Under each contract vehicle, there are two pools. Under each pool, we anticipate awarding 40 contracts. I'm looking through the chat, and I saw somebody ask that question. So 40 contracts per pool. In the event of a tie at the 40th position, all offers will be awarded a contract. In addition to that, under this set-aside contract vehicle, we're going to look to make sure that there's sufficient representation of specific socioeconomic concerns and make awards of those too. We don't plan on awarding, we plan on awarding without discussions. So your goal is to submit your best offer initially. The benefit of this is you don't have to write lengthy narratives like you normally do. So you can tell your B&P team members to put their pens down, to relax. We're focusing our attention on you substantiating the actual work you've done in the past, the relevant experience projects. You also don't have to propose labor rates trying to predict what risk is associated with getting the contract. We have a mechanism in place where the fully burdened rates that you will be proposing for the labor categories we've identified can easily be determined fair and reasonable, and we have an escalation rate based off an index. You also get to choose projects both from the federal and non-federal market. We understand that your experience does not reside solely in the federal market, and you should be able to take credit for work provided to non-federal entities. And finally, and most importantly perhaps, this is a very objective rather than subjective evaluation. So long as you can substantiate and we can validate the information, you will get the points that you have claimed in your self-score sheet. So as I mentioned, two contract vehicles. Within each contract vehicle are two pools. Why do we have pools? Well, a couple years ago, Small Business Administration promulgated a final rule directing the government as a whole to come up with a way to consistently identify the size of contractors at the contract and task orders, especially if multiple NAICS codes are assigned to that contract vehicle. What exactly are these pools? They are a grouping of NAICS codes of the same size standard. Pool 1 consists of 3 NAICS codes, each of which have a size standard of 11 million. Pool 2 consists of 5 NAICS codes, each consisting of the same size standard of 15 million. What that means is we will know right away your size standard when you submit your proposal, you get your award, and at the task order level. How are the pools and the key service areas the scope of HCAS related? Each pool consists of the same identical scope. All 3 KSAs are within Pool 1. All three KSAs are in Pool 2. So one pool is not dedicated to one KSA. They are identical. The scope of your proposal will consist of your relevant experience, again, based on your KSAs. One of the minimum requirements of your projects is that the project has to align with one of the KSAs, and it does not reside with the NAICS codes. And finally, each relevant experience will have, ideally, associated past performance that was rated so we can validate. The only minimum requirement we have under both contract vehicles is that 4 of the 6 relevant experience projects need to be assigned to one of the NAICS codes identified in the pool applied for. This is not a scoring element. We have taken that out, as Gal mentioned earlier. So what are the benefits for you? This ensures that the contractors under the small business set-aside can compete against other contractors of a similar size standard. We don't feel it's appropriate and fair for the very small businesses to have to compete against much larger businesses. It levels the playing field, and again, the goal for us is to reduce the artificial barriers of entry. It also allows contractors under the unrestricted contract vehicle to take credit for your subcontracting to small businesses. We've identified the predominant NAICS code under both pools, and depending on the NAICS code identified by the ordering contracting officers at the task order level, the contractors will know what the size standard is, and you will be able to take credit for your subcontractors if they're small businesses. And this essentially gives the ordering contracting officers, the government as a whole, greater flexibility. Next slide gives you a diagram of sorts of what I just mentioned. Again, 2 pools. We anticipate awarding 40 contracts under each pool. You can see the different size standards. We have identified the NAICS codes per pool. And I just want to mention one last time, each pool consists of the same scope, the 3 KSAs. So you can provide human capital, human resources, organizational performance improvement, the full breadth of HCAS under either pool. The actual scope of HCAS, as I mentioned earlier, consists of 3 key service areas, which are what I call subcategories to the human capital category. Again, customized training and development services, human capital strategy services, and organizational performance improvement. Working with OPM collaboratively, reaching out to other federal agencies, we've identified these 3 key service areas as being most meaningful and appropriate for HCAS for today and tomorrow. We've highlighted some of the areas that fall under the 3 key service areas, but they are not limiting. This is a living, breathing contract solution, and we could not capture every possible service or solution that could be provided under these 3 key service areas. But it kind of gives you a taste of what we're looking at under the respective KSA. Again, the solution that you propose at the task order level can include ancillary services. We're looking for integrated total solutions to meet the needs at the individual, unit, and enterprise level for all federal agencies. The next slide Gail will brief you on is how we've arrived at our small business engagement strategy.
Thank you, Bjorn. If you can remember back to 2 slides ago from where Bjorn was sharing the contract structure, it shows how much we will be engaging small business with this contract vehicle. Having a separate set-aside contract vehicle means that our customers who choose to release their task orders under the small business contract vehicle, they'll choose the correct pool, and then all competition will just be amongst small businesses. The task order that's released under unrestricted will be just for unrestricted, but unrestricted can also include a small business. But within the small business contract vehicle, that means the competition is solely reserved for small businesses. In addition to our having small businesses on not only our small business contract vehicle, but also on the unrestricted, we're also engaging small business through the subcontracting goals of our other than small businesses. All other than small businesses will be required to have a subcontracting plan that we will be evaluating to make sure that their goals are not just attainable but also reaching for all of our for all of our other than small contractors. If you'll notice in our draft RFP, our subcontracting goals are 50% to small businesses, which is a lot to engage small businesses. In addition to other than small businesses submitting subcontracting plans, we're also allowing small businesses to submit subcontracting plans if they choose. And the reason why they would choose is that if a small business is anticipating that their business might grow beyond their small business size standard, they would want to be eligible to vertically on-ramp onto the unrestricted contract vehicle. And to do this, this small business will need to have the exact same score as the last contractor, which I'll get into in the next slide about that we will be awarding to 40 contracts. Actually, Bjorn went into that, but I'm going to get in more depth of it. So the 40th contract, based on their score, will be awarded a contract, and if you want to on-ramp onto that, you need to meet that contractor's score. And there's one element that was scoring amount that's only on the unrestricted contract vehicle, and that's meeting or exceeding small business goals. This is not present on the small business RFP. I believe that was a change from the draft RFP. We realized that without having a subcontracting goal, none of the small businesses would have the meeting or exceeding elements be able to meet that. So that has been removed, but any small business who is anticipating growing their business, we're giving them the opportunity to, through the subcontracting plan, meet or exceed their goals so they can get points in that element if they move up to the unrestricted. In addition, with the small business contract vehicle, we've identified several socioeconomic subgroups where set-asides are given by our customers, and to ensure that all of these set-aside needs can be met by our customers, we'll be awarding three contracts to small disadvantaged businesses, women-owned small businesses, small disabled, service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses, and hub-zone small businesses. And this will work by after the top 40 proposals are chosen based on their top score, on their self-score, we'll look at the composition, and if we do not have representation from one of these 4 socioeconomic subgroups, we will take the next highest scoring in offerer within that socioeconomic subgroup and bump them up to be considered for award. However, if there aren't any, if we don't have enough eligible applicants within that socioeconomic subgroup, we will award to as many as we're able to, up to 3. Now that I've somewhat alluded to how we're going to be screening and evaluating, I'm going to go into depth about how we're going to identify the top 40 and then screen and evaluate those proposals. As Bjorn covered several slides earlier, that the HCATs are evaluated on objective evaluation criteria. It streamlines it both for us and for you. What we will do is we'll be sorry, I never changed the slide. We'll first identify the top 40 contractors via their self-score, and then for the small business, this will be a time when we look at the composition and see if we need to add to our top 40. And all ties are actually also included in this top 40. So if there's 5 ties at the 40th position, all 45 of those, there will be 45 in the top 40, and they're all in contention for award. So we will only be looking at the proposals that are in contention for award. We'll first provide an initial screening that what we'll do is in both the proposal checklist, which has been changed since the draft RFP, and where you'll list every single file name that you have associated with the criteria in the proposal checklist. And with the self-score sheet, you'll also be listing every single file name that's used to substantiate the self-score sheet. And we're going to take those 2 lists of files and compare them to what was included on your proposal submission. A change from the draft RFP is that all proposals will be submitted via a readable DVD. And what you'll do once you've submitted your readable DVD is you'll send us an email to our confirmation email telling us that I've submitted my proposal and here's my tracking number. This way, both the government and you are able to see the timeliness of your submission. And if we receive an email from you but do not find the readable DVD, we will reach out to you to ensure that we have that if there is with the tracking number. So this combined with the initial screening is to make sure that we have everything that was submitted on time and that the offerer intended to submit to us. And only after that do we then continue to do our minimum requirements evaluation and our score validation. And this is done once everything that the offerer intended for us to have is within the government's possession. So there are minimum requirements both associated with the relevant experience projects and with the RFP in general, with the eligibility and responsiveness of the offerer. And these, with the ones that are not within the self-score sheet, they will be reviewed to make sure that the offerer is meeting the minimum requirements. And then with the relevant experience projects, their minimum requirements will be checked with the self-score sheet at the same time that the score is validated. If the minimum requirement is not met within the general RFP requirements or the relevant experience projects, then that proposal will be removed from consideration and the next highest scoring proposal will be moved up into the top 40. This also happens, this becomes our floating top 40, that proposals will shift as minimum requirements are not met, and also if we're validating a score and we're not able to validate it at the same score that the offerer reported, then that offer will now be ranked based on their new score. And if their new score is not high enough to keep them in the top 40, that proposal will also be floated out, and then the next highest scoring proposal will be floated in. And this also works with the set-asides for the socioeconomic subgroups, that if one of those proposals either did not meet a minimum requirement or their score was validated to be lower than either the next socioeconomic offer in their subgroup, or if they were in the top 40 and naturally, then if they were naturally in the top 40 but they still remain the top based on their score, and they're still the top within their socioeconomic subgroup, they'll remain in contention for award. However, if they are removed based on either their score or their not meeting a minimum requirement, the next proposal within that socioeconomic subgroup floats up. And if they were naturally in the top 40, the next scoring proposal, that doesn't matter which socioeconomic subgroup, will also float up to that. This is why it's very important that every single scored element and minimum requirement is substantiated with documentation. And after we've completed the floating of the top 40 with all of our top 40 proposals plus ties have now met the minimum requirements and their scores have been validated, we'll move on to evaluating the pricing for just those top 40. So I just spoke a lot about the scoring and the top 40, but I also alluded to the minimum requirements in regards to the RFP. And with this slide, we show the offer responsibility evaluation. And this is a two-structure approach in which we're looking both at government databases and at the documents provided by the offerer to meet these minimum requirements. Okay. Bjorn is now going to elaborate on the pool application. What I just covered was part of the proposal application. An offerer will submit one proposal, but they can apply to multiple pools. And the responsibility and eligibility will be included in the proposal and will not need to be duplicated. But with the pool application, they'll have to have one for every pool that they're applying to. Bjorn?
Thank you. Okay. I'm looking through the chat list. I'm going to see if I can answer some of the questions that have been coming in. The preponderance of our evaluations will be dedicated to the 6 relevant experience projects that you, as the offerer, have to submit and include in your proposal. Each one of those 6 relevant experience projects have to have been awarded and performed by you. So there was a question asked, can you take credit for a partner who was awarded and performed that work? Well, maybe. The only time we're going to allow you to take credit for somebody else's work is if you are submitting a proposal under an existing joint venture. Essentially, we're not going to allow for new partnerships, new contractor team arrangements to come in and submit a proposal and be eligible for award. So all of your projects have to have been awarded under your DUNS number, under your legal name. As we mentioned earlier, 4 of those projects have to be correspond to one of the NAICS codes assigned under the pool you are applying for, and that will help with the competition and ensure that companies are competing amongst similar-sized companies. If you are submitting a proposal for for both pools, and you're permitted to, you have to submit at a minimum 10 projects. You can go the extra mile and submit 12, but realizing the difficulties with the NAICS codes and our minimum requirements, we're going to allow a minimum of 10, if and only if you're submitting a proposal under both pools. Each project, at a minimum, has to have be within scope of at least one of the KSAs. Again, each pool is inclusive of the same scope, each 3 KSAs. As long as your relevant experienced projects are within scope of one KSA in addition to the other minimum requirements, and I'll touch on them later, we will count that and you will be eligible for award. So what kind of relevant experienced projects can you submit? We've analyzed the federal market, we've looked at the non-federal market, and realized that there are a lot of different ways that these projects have been awarded and performed. So we've tried to take as holistic approach as we possibly could and try to define everything that possibly could be submitted and taken credit for. So your typical contract, a task order against an indefinite contract or BPA, against the multiple award schedule program. We also included, based on your feedback, the collection of task orders that Gail had mentioned earlier. One of your relevant experienced projects can consist of up to 6 separate projects, task orders, however you call it, so long as it's within our parameters, and count that for the point that you're claiming. The bottom line is all the information you submit, all 6 projects, their values, their duration, the inclusion of the KSAs, whether or not it's a federal project or not, it has to be validated by us. So you have to submit the verifiable documentation for us to validate. And that's why this evaluation process, this basis for award, is so objective. We're going to look at what you submit, something that's been signed, certified, executed in the past, so we can validate it. What I'm showing on the screen right now are the current minimum requirements for each relevant experience project. As I mentioned, it has to be within scope of at least one KSA and have some component be customized. The work performed has to have been performed within at least 5 years. In addition, the minimum duration of that project has to be at least 3 months. This is not, HCAS is not a cost-based solution. This is for total solutions, knowledge-based, that requires skills and the ability to develop a specific solution to meet a specific need that can't be purchased or acquired from your typical commercial off-the-shelf product. In addition, each relevant experience project has to have an estimated or obligated value of no less than $25,000. We anticipate that the task orders awarded under HCAS to exceed this value, and we want to see offers that have performed this type of work consistently in the past. In addition, if your project has past performance information, your average rating has to be at least 3.00. And we will validate that through CPARs or PIPers or one of our documents that we've developed if it's a non-federal project or the past performance doesn't reside in a federal database like PIPers. In addition, as I mentioned, each relevant experience project, for all the points you're claiming, if you are trying to exceed our minimum requirements and get those additional points, you have to submit verifiable contractual documents. Somebody in last week's event asked us, do we need to submit everything related to this project? Well, it depends. If you can demonstrate, point out, call out, identify the information that we can easily verify with respect to these minimum requirements and then also exceeding them, then no, you don't have to submit everything. The more information you submit to us, the more onus you take in pointing us in the right direction to show where the information can be verified. Moving on, each relevant experience project has to have been awarded and performed for an entity outside of your corporate structure. So if you're if you're a division under a parent company and you've done work for another division under that parent company, we won't accept that. And lastly, each project cannot have been terminated for cause or default. So these are our minimum requirements. We think they're fair, appropriate, and make sense based on our vision of HCAHPS and our evaluation methodology. Now, Gail's going to go over how the automated self-scoring worksheet works based on the information that you submitted as we verify the information that you submitted.
Thank you, Bjorn. I've been made aware I'm going to try and speak as loudly as I can, just so that everybody can hear me. If there was an issue before that you could not hear me, or if you continue not to be able to hear me, just put your questions in the question box, and we will be able to answer them during Q&A. So we've talked about several different attachments during this speech, and the HCAHPS RFP is based on 10 integrated attachments that are all self-purpose and are automated as much as possible. We posted 2 of our attachments on last Tuesday, May 19th. Our attachment J.6, which is the past performance substitute form that Bjorn was talking about, which you would use in lieu of having a PIPERS report if either it was a non-federal project or if no PIPERS report exists. And this allows you to have your contracting officer, assessing official fill out so you can have a past performance rating. And for a non-federal project, the assessing official will be determining your NAICS. And we also posted our attachment J9, collection of task orders, which I talked about earlier. And both these 2 attachments, in addition to a draft version of CLNM, were posted to help all offers who are anticipating submitting a proposal and to get a head start on reaching out to their customers. So as I was saying with the RFP attachments, that the attachments are integrated as much as possible, and that there's automation that's in them. And our key attachment is the self-scoring worksheet, which will encompasses points on both the accreditations and the relevant experience projects. And this will ask the offerer a series of questions, and based on their answer to the questions, the self-score sheet will total the points and say if a minimum requirement was met. So as the offerer, you will be guided through your submission through this form, and right away, based on how you're answering something, what requirements have been met and what your self-score will be. In addition to answering the questions, you will have to provide substantiation for each element, which Bjorn was touching on the slide prior. And you will, for every element that you claim points for, and for every minimum requirement, you will need to show, to get those points and that minimum requirement, you'll need to do that by substantiating documents. And on the sheet, you'll list the file names of the documents that are substantiating each element. And you'll also be able to write if there is a method to how we should be looking at these documents. For example, if there's 3 documents that make up a certain element, you'll tell us to look at the 3 documents and where to look. We recommend that you highlight the different parts in which you want us to look to ensure that what you're substantiating can be validated by us. And as we're going, once we get the self-score sheet, we use that score sheet to put into a database and rank the proposals and determine the top 40. And then we use the self-score sheet for us as evaluation purposes to validate your points. We've reevaluated the points to make sure that points for past performance and having multiple KSAs are receiving the most amount of points. And the other elements below that, and we think all of the elements that we're giving points for give for complexity and show that the scope of the project performed matches what will be on HCATS. Let me change the slide. Okay, the next slide shows the other part of the self-scoring worksheet. And these are the accreditations attached to the company. And you will use the self-scoring worksheet to give us the file name for your certifications and the information needed in order by the RFP that we need to validate the certifications. And our accreditations are broken down into ISOs and company systems that have been reviewed. Okay, now that we have gone through this whole entire presentation, we're hoping that you're now on the exact same page that we are and that you want to submit a proposal. What to do is we encourage you that if you're able to compete for more than one pool, and if you're a small business, you're able to compete on both the small business HCATS and the unrestricted HCATS. As I stressed earlier, you want to ensure that all your documentation is included on your readable DVD proposal and that you're substantiating each and every minimum requirement and scoring elements. We have on section L4.1 is our proposal format table, in which we go through every element that you should be including, and we provide a naming convention for your files. In addition, the proposal checklist is a great guide for you preparing your proposal. What you should not do is alter any of our attachments, RFP attachments, in any way. Because they're automated, it takes away our ability to use them. And don't submit a paper copy. And as always, when you're submitting a proposal, don't falsify anything within that proposal. If you have any questions about submitting your proposal, you can submit them to hcatsquestions@gsa.gov, and this has been our question inbox for this entire draft RFP time, and this is an inbox that we share amongst all of us, and we're able to group all the questions together and take appropriate action if something is being asked by many people. And it's also, you've probably used this in regards to Industry Day today. So now, let me adjust my slide. In addition to reaching out to us through HCATS questions box, you can get information from our Interact site and FedBizOps. Both the links of our solicitation take you straight to our pre-solicitation notices on FedBizOps, and the Interact link takes you to our Interact site. And we recommend that if you're not already on these lists, you submit your email to receive notifications from both FedBizOps and Interact. Both of these slides were actually already posted on Interact yesterday, so you might already have access to them and be able to use these links. Now we're going to go to the questions part of this program. What's happening is you've been submitting your questions all along through the chat box, and our team has been collecting them, and both Alex and Jimmy will read the questions out for Bjorn and myself, and we'll answer them.
Hey, Gail and Bjorn, this is Alex. One of the first questions that came in early on is, why isn't Oconus work included in the point value chart?
Sure. So we couldn't give credit for every single possible element of your project. And you have to remember, the preponderance of work to be performed under HCAS will be in Washington, D.C. So we didn't think giving points for Oconus work was meaningful or appropriate.
All right. Another person came in with a question that they assumed that a single OPM TMA project that was competed and awarded once would count as a single project past performance, even if it's made up incrementally of funded task orders. Is this a correct assumption?
It's correct. So they have the option for one project of using a collection of task orders. No task order within that collection can be used as another relevant experience project. However, any one of those task orders that any contracting officer awarded can be a single relevant experience project.
Okay, the next question. On the point value chart, is a vendor considered a subcontractor legal entity?
Well, I know that it's not possible for the person to tell us.
The offeror will be considered a prime contractor if the customer directly awarded the contract to it. So the federal government awarded the contract, you as the offeror are the prime contractor. If you have a subcontractor under that federal project, your subcontractor under HCAS will be considered a first-tier subcontractor. And we have 2 points, 2 levels of points for both of those classifications.
Next question.
This question's come up a few times in chat, but the overall gist is what is the procurement process for new government contractors who may not have a lot of past experience that they can provide?
Sure. So what we've done, as I mentioned earlier, is to try to broaden the ability of all offers, all interested parties, to submit projects regardless of to whom you've performed those services for. You do not have to have previous federal government experience to be eligible or even be awarded an HCAS contract. We have reduced the artificial barriers to entry. We do recognize that there are more nuances to being a contractor under the federal government, and that's why we're giving extra points to them. But that in and of itself does not preclude or make you ineligible to be awarded a contract under HCAS. You can submit projects you've performed work under for non-federal government entities.
What if I'm a new company with a new DUNS number, but I have team members that have over 15 years experience?
Unfortunately, we are unable to validate the work you performed by your employees. So that's why we have to, our baseline is the projects awarded to your official legal name and your DUNS number.
Okay. Are the point systems used to pre-qualify the vendors before they're judged for their technical response?
We will only be evaluating the proposals that are in contention for award, so therefore we have sorted the proposals by their self-score. And so yes, we will only be looking at the ones who have the top 40 self-score.
regarding the accreditations and certifications, is the prime expected to have all of these, or can it be shared, a shared effort among the consortium of members?
Sure. One, we don't expect you to have everything. And two, you can take credit, as I mentioned earlier, for accreditation only under your corporate structure. So if you're a division and your parent company has that certification, so long as you can substantiate that that accreditation also applies to your division, your entity, then yes, you can take credit for it.
I just wanted to stress that scoring elements are just that. They're scoring elements. They're not minimum requirements. And we don't anticipate that every offer, any offer will be able to take the maximum amount of points. So it's not something to stress about.
When do you anticipate the final RFPs to be released?
Sometime before the end of the fiscal year.
The updated draft indicates that acceptable purchasing and auditing systems only count if audited within the last 3 years. We suggest that based on the well-documented backlog of auditing agencies, the time limit be removed. During OASIS procurement, GSA removed the time limit on these systems based on extensive industry association and government feedback.
We're revisiting that requirement, and stay tuned to see some changes in the final RFP.
The revised draft indicates that relevant experience project period of performance does not include option years or time beyond the proposal submission date. However, for relevant experience project value, bidders are instructed to base the score on the full period of performance and the full contract value. We suggest that a period of performance points be measured based on the full period of performance envisioned by the government buyer, which is easily demonstrated in contract documentation. Otherwise, the only projects that can score the most score the most highest scores would have been awarded in a 2005 to 2010 timeframe, favoring old government requirements over those that are newer and more accurately reflect agencies' needs today.
Sure. We feel that the fair and equitable treatment of the duration of the relevant experience projects, the baseline we're working off of is work actually performed, not future or anticipated work, because you don't know, nor do we know, if you actually will be performing that work. For a variety of reasons, options may not be exercised. So to treat all offers equitably, we feel that it's appropriate to evaluate and validate the actual work performed in the past.
Okay. Next question is, why is the past performance contracting officer responsible for certifying the collection of task orders, being asked to determine whether the task orders included a KSA? According to the Q&A, it is the GSA contracting officer that will make this determination. If some of the task orders were performed concurrently with others, how are bidders to compute the duration of the collection of task orders? By adding the total months of the work that was performed, or by computing the number of months between the date of the first task orders as signed and the last task order's period of performance concluded?
Okay, is that the end of the question? Okay, so the point behind having the contracting officer certify that it's a collection of task orders is that they're certifying that these are connected via the project. If anybody has an MAS contract or has an MAS contract, many task orders can be issued off of it. And we don't know if they're connected, but the contracting officer does know if they're connected because they're the ones who awarded it. To hit on the duration part of the question, this is actually something that's going to be done by the self-score sheet that will total the duration for you. It will take from the earliest task order to the latest task order and take that period of performance and subtract any breaks in service to get that period of performance.
And we've outlined in both draft RFPs in Section L how we're going to calculate that. So I would recommend for everybody to take a look back at the draft RFP and just to familiarize yourself with how we're calculating the collection of task orders.
For this RFP, are we able to propose on a target area, or do we have to propose on the entire RFP?
I don't know what's meant by target area, but to be eligible for award and to be awarded a contract, you're going to be awarded a contract under the pool applied for. With that said, you don't have to have experience in all KSAs. You can be awarded a contract if you are in a niche market. We feel that our scoring elements and the minimum requirements allow for a playing level field. But if you're awarded a contract, you are awarded a contract under that pool and subsequently competing against all the other contractors under that pool at the task order level.
Okay. Next question. As it takes some time and expense to acquire ISO certifications, could GSA advise contractors of the points to be allocated to those certifications as soon as possible, ideally before the release of the final RFPs, so contractors may compute the cost-benefit of acquiring these certifications?
This was actually released last Tuesday in Section M that we posted the draft version. If you'll notice, I don't remember the exact points. I don't remember the exact points allocated, but they are within the double digits, which is dramatically less than anything that's awarded for a relevant experience project.
Okay. The next industry partner calls out the attachment J7, which requires contractors to input DCAA audited rates. We understand that contractors that haven't had a DCAA audit will have the option to get an audit based on being in the top 40 scores. Nevertheless, contractors cannot input DCAA audited rates in attachment J7 now if they have not had a DCAA audit.
Okay.
Will this be removed?
This is also something that is up for debate. As you see, one of the changes was the opt-in option for having your accounting system audited. So this is another item that is stay tuned for the RFP.
Okay. The next question is, why are the qualifications of subcontractors not considered if you are looking for capable teams of vendors?
The reason why we're not permitting teaming arrangements at the contract level is because we're looking for contractors that have themselves the experience consistently in the past to perform. We expect at the task order level for the contractors to form teaming arrangements and partnerships to meet the specific needs when they arise. But since we don't have specific needs right now, we want to make sure that the contracts we award go to contractors themselves that have consistently performed and can take full credit for it.
Okay. What will be the on-ramping process if a company graduates small business status? Will it be rolled to the unrestricted?
It will not be rolled. I touched on it briefly earlier that if a small business at the option period is now determined to be a large business based on the pool that they're in and the size standard, they will have the opportunity to be on-ramped to unrestricted based on their score and needing to tie with the last, with the 40th contractor with that score.
So essentially, that small business will be placed on dormant status if they can no longer certify that they're a small business and they are eligible to apply, as Gail mentioned, under the unrestricted and to be awarded that contract. All they have to do is achieve the score achieved by the 40th score proposal under the initial contract award.
If I'm a small business on the unrestricted contract, do I need to provide a subcontracting plan?
No. No small business is required to submit a subcontracting plan. We're giving the option that would only probably be exercised on the small business HCATs of a small business submitting a subcontracting plan.
Okay. Will small business primes be required to have DCAA audited rates to qualify and get through the required gates?
And again, we're going to have to revisit the accounting system topic, and just stay tuned. And we anticipate making some changes to the final RFP.
Okay. The Q&A indicated that work done under the NTIS joint ventures might be acceptable, but that the contractor U.S. government joint ventures could not be submitted. Please clarify whether NTIS joint venture work may be submitted as a past performance.
The simple answer is yes. Any project can be submitted so long as they meet the minimum requirements. I am going to assume the person asking this question wants to know if we're going to consider it a federal project or not. And the baseline for that is that the contractor task order, that project, has to be awarded by an agency that follows the FAR in sum. HCAS is a FAR-based acquisition, and to qualify as a federal project, your project has to have been awarded by an agency that uses the FAR in sum.
Okay. We understand that prime contractors are to certify NAICS for subcontracts. Offerers may self-certify NAICS on commercial work. Why is this the case since both count as non-federal projects?
It's not a difference. What any non-federal project, the first method of determining the NAICS code is from the past performance substitute form. Any customer will fill that out and not only provide the rating, but determine the NAICS code. If the past performance substitute form is not filled out, then a non-federal government project will be able, the offer will be able to self-certify that NAICS.
Okay. All right. Will the government consider lifting the limit on the number of sole source past performance qualifications that a vendor can submit with their small business proposal?
Yes, we have. There's no limit anymore.
Given the desire, oh wait, Tiffany caught that one. Does the Navy Seaport IDIQ vehicle count as a collection and all contracts under it count as the 6 related task orders?
We couldn't answer that at this moment. What I suggest you do is you send us an email, and we would have to do some further research on that contract vehicle.
And you could submit that question to hcatquestions@gsa.gov.
Correct.
All right, next question. What is the range of project values in terms of dollars and scope?
I'm going to assume you mean at a task order level. I think historically, task orders have been around the $50,000 to $100,000 range. I'm looking if I get some heads nodding. That's not to say that there won't be task orders awarded with less value or even more value. Again, this is a government-wide acquisition. All federal agencies are permitted to use these contract vehicles, so you should anticipate to see some large, complex task orders and also some smaller task orders. We can't identify everything at this moment, but we want to cover as large of a base as possible under the human capital category.
Okay, this question is asking for clarification on something that was mentioned earlier in our presentation. Is the contractor expected to propose pricing types in accordance with task order requirements, or will task orders be released with predefined pricing types, such as firm fixed price, cost reimbursable, time and materials?
Okay.
Okay. Well, the first part of the answer is, as I mentioned before, our attachment J7, with where you put your direct labor rates, is something that is under revision, and I am not sure if we want to go into more depth about what was the past requirements, though it might not
So
say.
essentially, at the contract level, each labor rate is going to be fully burdened and will be awarded as a fixed price economic price adjustment. So we've built in an escalation rate for all 10.5 years of 8-year contract, and that's where the fixed price EPA comes into play. At the task order level, as I mentioned, when the bona fide need arises, you can propose your pricing type as you see fit and as the contract officer sees fit. The labor rates awarded at the contract level will only come into play if there is no competition at the task order level. The only time they come in play is if a sole source time and materials task order is awarded. Other than that, you can propose rates that exceed the rates awarded at your contract level. Again, because we can't forecast what your solution will entail, what labor categories you will need to use, the skill level of your labor categories.
Okay. Do you consider work done for the D.C. government federal work?
No, it has, as Bjorn stated earlier, a federal project is one awarded by a federal government and a federal agency that abides by all parts of the FAR.
Okay. Why is the requirement to have relevant experience assigned to one of the NAICS codes in a pool applying under when relevant experience is based on KSAs, not NAICS?
We are trying to achieve, we're trying to allow offers to compete against similar size offers. Because of the SBA final rule, this is our solution. The structure at play does not drive the scope. The minimum requirement of each project is that the project has to be within scope of at least one of the KSAs.
Okay. So the SBA final rule, does that make pools relevant to large companies?
It does, because we will know for any offerer and any contractor at the contract and task order level whether or not you are small or other than small.
Okay. On the slides, E, D, W, O, S, B category was not listed. Why wasn't it listed as part of the maximum practical opportunity list? Why was it omitted?
That's something that is still up for debate. What was listed are the most commonly used socioeconomic groups and the ones that are reported on government databases. But that is something that's being revisited.
All right. Is it possible to restate the requirements for past performance insofar as what is deemed recent and relevant? Also, if under the small business suite, a subcontractor's past performance will count, or if only the past performance being evaluated is that of the prime small business bidder?
Let me take a stab at the first part of the question. Okay. If you have something that you wish for us to consider, please send it to the email address we identified earlier. The minimum requirements of the relevant experience projects was a culmination of and a collection of your feedback from industry. Originally, the minimum requirements were too high as per industry, so we brought them back a little bit. Alex, you're going to have to repeat the second part of that question.
Okay. If the small business suite, a subcontractor's past performance will count, or if only the past performance being evaluated is that of the prime small business bidder?
I think we're not quite sure what the second part of the question is. person who submitted that question could re-ask that.
Yeah, send the questions to HCAS, questions@gsa.gov. We don't want to make an assumption of what you're trying to get at.
Okay. And again, that web email address is hcapquestions@gsa.gov. I think I
Correct.
coughed over
Yep.
Bjorn.
Okay. I changed the slide, so now instead of the Q&A slide, we're on the slide that has that email.
Perfect, thank you. All right. Who determines whether a task order is released under HCATS unrestricted or HCATS small business? Federal agency, customer, or GSA or OPM?
The federal agency, based on the market research performed by that program office, that ordering contract officer, they will make a determination which contract vehicle and which pool to solicit their needs under.
Is there a dollar amount required for relevant projects?
There is, we've lowered it since the draft RFP. It's now $25,000.
Okay. For the past performance requirement, is it the past 3 years or the past 5 years?
We're allowing past performance from the last 5 years. It just has to have had a period of performance within the last 5 years. So the project could have been ongoing for 10 years, but hits within the last 5.
Okay. I think we may have touched on this one, but let me ask it again. The NAICS codes assigned to a project does not necessarily align with the contractor's relevant experience under that project. Mandating that the NAICS must correspond is contradictory to the intent of performance being experience aligned. Please consider removing this.
We understand that this topic has caused a lot of confusion, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a step back. We're going to draft a blog specific to this topic and hopefully identify in greater detail and in simpler language why we have them, what they're, why they're in there, and how it impacts you. So just stay tuned. We're going to have a blog posted in our Interact community, and hopefully that will address your concerns.
Okay. This one is a specific question, but and this may be for OPM, but is OPM TMA project management plan that is approved and accepted by the customer agency and OPM constitute a valid contract document?
Please submit that question again to hcapquestions@gsa.gov. What we will do is we will consult with OPM so we provide consistent and accurate information.
Yeah, I think that I would also include what is covered within the project management plan to get a better understanding.
And what requirement you're trying to meet with it.
Okay. Next question. Is the RFP statement of work a valid contract document for validating a KSA?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. If 6 relevant experiences are submitted as a collection, how are they requesting we score the grouping? What CPAR score should be used?
Okay, I've got that on the self-score sheet. Since this is a new addition, there will be a separate sheet just for collection of task orders, which will guide you through submitting your collection of task orders and will provide the score for you on it. There's an example of a collection of task orders in Section M that was released last Tuesday that will show how the scoring will work for the collection of task orders, past performance. It basically, it works the same way that every element that's scored will then be divided and averaged to get your complete rating.
Okay. Will consideration be given that the scope be allowed to be wide open based on KSA definitions, or small businesses will be limited in responding?
We think that how the KSAs are currently written allow for a broad interpretation of the services provided by both small and other than small offers. If you think we need to include more structure or additional language, please send us your comments, send us your suggestions at hcats questions@gsa.gov.
Okay. This next question might be a repeat. Here we go. You are now allowing the option to include as a single relevant experience project within the 6 required relevant experience projects a collection of task orders that fall within one contract. Can a task order that is included within that collection as part of a single contract also be included as a separate individual relevant experience project, such as one of the remaining 5 relevant experience projects?
Yeah.
No double dipping.
No double dipping is clear. Okay.
And that does include in the definition.
This one is citing the draft RFP, but section L5.3.3 indicates that any project that does not have an ISR or SSR will not be considered as having met or exceeded total small business goals. However, I'm not sure that a business competing for an unrestricted slot would have an ISR or SSR for a project they conducted if they were a small business at the time the project was conducted. Would you consider giving credit for meeting small business goals if the bidder was a small business at the time awarded as a small business, since these circumstances the project did not, or the project did clearly meet the total small business goal?
We
Does that make
believe
sense?
that, yeah, I got it.
Okay.
We believe that the contractual document for us to validate whether or not an offer met or exceeded their small business goals resides within the ISR or SSR or their counterpart, the standard form 294 or 295. So unfortunately, those are the only 4 documents we're accepting to validate whether or not small business goals have been met or exceeded.
Okay. Will you consider project work performed for an employer while you were a W-2 employee?
No, you have to submit, the relevant experience project has to have been awarded under your official legal name and DUNS number.
Would you please clarify the teaming requirements to fulfill the KSA requirements?
There are no, under HCATS, we are not permitting or accepting offers to submit a proposal under a teaming arrangement. The only time an offer can take credit for a project for other entities is if the project was awarded and performed under an existing joint venture and that DUNS number. So essentially, in SAM, we should see a DUNS number of that joint venture, and only those projects awarded to that DUNS number and that joint venture as a whole can take credit for it, not the individual entities underneath it.
Why is a CMMI certification not included in the company certification list?
Consulting with OPM, the Category Management Leadership Council, and listening and hearing a lot of feedback from industry, the preponderance of feedback we got was the accreditations we had in the past were not appropriate and applicable to HCATS. So we've removed a few. We've added one ISO, the 27001, but we looked at the consensus of what industry had to say, the experts in this market, in this category, and the vast majority of you said this is not applicable.
Okay. This question, it regards the proposal format table. How are the proposal file names for each volume differentiated for a Pool 1 submission and a Pool 2 submission?
Okay, within the proposal format table, it actually defines how you would submit between the different pools and the different relevant experience projects.
We have an alphanumeric naming convention. We openly admit and recognize it probably doesn't jive right now. Remember, this is a draft RFP. We will make sure that when the final RFP is released, the proposal table will capture both pools 1 and 2 and the corresponding documents that you can submit under each.
Okay. If we're a subcontractor to a qualifying project, does this experience count, or are you looking for only prime contracts we've won?
It counts.
Okay. All right, this is an interesting question. The prime has 75% of the past performance, but the subs have the rest, which can be verified. Does this count, and would it meet the requirement?
We would need a little bit more context for that, so if you could, please send that question, again, to hcastquestions@gsa.gov. We'll work with you and see if we can come up with the appropriate answer.
Okay. The next question, this person's just looking for validation. In summary, to compete, the following is required. Within 5 years, dollar amount of at least $25,000, and it has to be submitted under a legal name or DUNS number with the HCAT NAICS codes.
Well, for 4 of the projects, you must have an HCAT NAICS code of the pool you're applying to.
Sorry, Gail, what was that?
For 4 of the 6 relevant experience projects per pool,
Okay.
need to have the NAICS code. 2 of the projects do not, but the rest was correct. And except for the DUNS, you can claim relevant experience project from someone within your corporate structure if a meaningful relationship commitment letter is submitted.
Okay.
If you're looking under the unrestricted contract vehicle or draft RFP, I would advise you to look at L.5.2.2. That's L.5.2.2. That's where we list the minimum requirements for each relevant experience project.
Yes,
Okay.
as Bjorn,
I'm sorry, Gail.
I was just going to mention, as Bjorn brings up the new version of CL&M, there have been a lot of changes. If you haven't looked at them, we advise that you look due to all the changes. And there still might be more changes, but this is a closer version.
Okay. As a small business, we do not have the accreditations. How does this impact the evaluation of the small business prime?
It doesn't impact. It does, as we mentioned, it doesn't preclude you from submitting an offer, from being eligible for award, or even being awarded the contract. We've listened to what industry has to say. We have substantially changed the scoring allocation where the preponderance of scores are dedicated to the relevant experience projects and their past performance. So not having any accreditation does not preclude you from being awarded a contract.
Okay. Upon release of the final RFP, how much time will the government provide to the contractors submitting proposals?
We're looking in the neighborhood of approximately 60 days.
Okay. Next question. One of our clients is highly experienced with 15 years of proven past experience in all areas of KSA 1. Please confirm the scope of the work in the contract task order can be used to define the NAICS versus the arbitrary selection of NAICS in the pool. And they called out NAICS code 541611.
Without additional context, what I would suggest is to submit that question and just further elaborate to hcastquestions@gsa.gov, and we can have a sidebar conversation.
Okay. What happens if the NAICS code on the federal contract awarded is incorrect? Is it possible to correct that NAICS code through a submitted alternate past performance?
Well, it's possible to use our NAICS code confirmation form, which is attachment J10, where if the NAICS code within our order of precedence, either on the contractual document, PIPers, FPDS, and G, is not the NAICS code that if the offer is claiming it's incorrect, they'll use the NAICS code confirmation form to reconfirm just for evaluation purposes.
Okay. Will you permit us to submit client reference letters to substantiate past performance? If so, would it also be acceptable to submit reference letters beyond 5 years to substantiate the depth and breadth of relevant experience?
Good question. Send that to HCAS questions. I don't know just yet. That's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah, that is a good question.
Yeah. We'll consider it.
It was stated that the task orders were in the range of $10,000 up to $100,000. That seems low.
I don't have the data in front of me.
The average, just from OPM answered this question in our response to the draft RFP. The average is $2 million and 16 months on the TMA contract. That's from OPM.
Yeah.
All right. My apologies.
Okay, so we have our final question, which is good because we're sitting at 2:59. How many small business contracts will be awarded?
40 contracts per pool, and all tied at the 40th position.
And in addition, the set-asides, but small businesses might also be awarded contracts under unrestricted.
Okay. So everyone on the last screen, or on the last slide is up on the screen right now, and it's important information. We have the HCATS Interact site that we've made several references to today. Please keep checking the Interact site often, because that's how we're communicating with you. We also have the FedBizOpps solicitation numbers for HCATS Unrestricted and HCATS Small Business. So if you need to do additional research and you want to make sure you have the most current draft, make sure you go to FedBizOpps and search those numbers. We also have links to them on the Interact site. And we've also cited the HCATS questions at gsa.gov. If you have questions, please submit them through this email box, because this is how we are addressing the questions that come in. This is Alexandra Rouse, and again, I just wanted to thank you for your participation today and your robust questions. We've been taking a listing of all the questions, and there's several areas that we're going to be taking another look at based on our discussion today. So thank you very much. We will be posting a lot of information on the HCATS Interact page coming up in the next few days. We'll be posting the transcript from the in-person industry day. We'll also post the Q&A that we had today from this virtual session. We'll also be expanding on a few of the areas in more detail through the Interact blog as well. Tiffany, did you have any final comments that you would like to add?
Well, I appreciate everyone taking time out to attend the virtual industry day. This is one of the first that we've done around, at least for our group, around an active solicitation. We have done industry days to answer questions around existing programs, that kind of thing. So I appreciate everyone participating in the experience, and if you've got additional questions, please submit them so we can get the final RFP out on the street, considering all of your feedback. So thanks very much, and have a great afternoon for those of you, well, actually on the West Coast and the East Coast.
Thanks, everyone.